The doors of the building on Lexington had been opened by the same pair of hands for 11 years, and in 11 years, Marcus Webb had learned exactly how long it takes a man to lose everything. 6 seconds, usually. That was how long it took Dale Ferris, the retired doorman everyone called Old Dale, to read a face crossing the lobby at dawn and know whether the day ahead held triumph or ruin. He never said what he saw. He just opened the door a little slower for the ones who needed the extra breath. Nobody in the building knew that about him. To the residents of the Cortlandt Tower, Dale was furniture, reliable, silent, 71 years old, with white hair combed the same way every morning and a wool coat that had been pressed so many times the creases had become permanent. He said good morning. He held umbrellas. He carried nothing of his own life into anyone else's. That was the job as he understood it. And he had understood it for 11 years without complaint, without ambition, without asking anyone to see him as more than the man who opened the door. Elliot Marsh saw him even less than that. Elliot was 38, the founder of Marsh Capital Partners, and he moved through the lobby each morning the way weather moves through a valley, fast, indifferent, gone before anyone could remark on it. He built his fortune on a simple, ruthless clarity. He trusted numbers, not people, and he had learned young that sentiment was the one liability no algorithm could hedge against. His father had lost the family's savings in 2008, believing a broker's confident voice instead of the numbers underneath it. Elliot had never made that mistake again. He built a firm designed to feel nothing when it moved money, and it had made him one of the wealthiest men in the state by the time he turned 35. That Tuesday morning began like any other, except that by 6:40 a.m., 3 hours before the opening bell, Elliot's phone would not stop lighting up. He came down into the lobby in a suit he hadn't finished buttoning, hair unbrushed, the particular gray color in his face that money cannot buy back once it appears. Dale opened the door as he always did. Elliot didn't look at him. He never looked at him. "Rough morning, Mr. Marsh," Dale said quietly, the way he said it to everyone, the way that asked nothing and offered everything. Elliot didn't answer. He walked past him onto the sidewalk and stopped there, phone shaking slightly in his hand, staring at a number that had dropped 11% overnight on news nobody had priced in, a foreign central bank move, a sovereign default rumor, the kind of event that turns careful men reckless in minutes. Marsh Capital was leveraged, badly. Elliot had made a bet 3 weeks earlier that the market would hold steady through the quarter. A bet built on models, on history, on everything he trusted more than instinct. The models had been wrong. He was standing on a sidewalk in Manhattan at 6:42 in the morning watching $200 million of client capital and roughly all of his own evaporate in real time. "You should sit down, sir," Dale said, stepping out from behind the door. "I don't need—" Elliot started, and then his knees genuinely buckled, just slightly. Just enough that Dale's hand caught his elbow before pride could refuse it. "Before we continue, if you believe that wisdom has no rank and grace wears no uniform, please like this video, subscribe to Kindness Tales, and share this with someone who needs to believe in people again today." Dale guided him to the stone bench beside the entrance the way you'd guide someone who had just been told bad news about a person they loved, because in a way, that's exactly what had happened. Money to a man like Elliot was not abstract. It was structure. It was the wall between him and the version of his father who sat at a kitchen table in 2009 with his head in his hands. "It's gone," Elliot said, mostly to himself. "It's actually gone." "How much of it is actually gone?" Dale asked. "And how much of it is still just falling?" Elliot looked up at him, really looked for the first time in 11 years, and something in the question stopped him. It wasn't sympathy. It was precision. It was the kind of question a doorman does not ask. "What do you mean?" Elliot said. "I mean there's a difference between a position that's closed and a position that's still moving," Dale said, sitting down on the edge of the bench, close but not presumptuous. "You look like a man watching a screen, not a man who's made any decisions yet. That's a different problem than the one you think you have." Elliot stared at him. "How would you know that?" Dale was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that comes before a door someone has kept closed a long time finally opens. "Because I spent 19 years on a trading floor before I ever picked up a set of keys to this building," he said. Equity derivatives, then macro. "I was a managing director at a firm that doesn't exist anymore. I've watched more money disappear before 9 a.m. than most men see in a lifetime." Elliot sat back slowly. The February wind moved between them, and for a moment neither man spoke. Because Elliot was doing the specific mental arithmetic of a person realizing every assumption he'd built about someone was wrong, and Dale was doing the older, quieter arithmetic of deciding how much of the past to let back into the room. "Then why are you opening doors?" Elliot finally asked. And he heard, even as he said it, how it sounded, and regretted it. And didn't take it back. Dale didn't flinch. He'd been asked worse by better people. "My son was 26, he said. He worked for me. I put him on a trade I was too confident about. A position I'd built over 4 months, dressed up in enough conviction that I stopped questioning it. It went bad the way yours is going bad right now, except we didn't have the capital to absorb it, and I'd let it get too large because I believed my own certainty more than the numbers underneath it. The firm folded. My son left the business over it, not because he blamed me, but because he watched what conviction without discipline does to a person, and he didn't want to become that. He doesn't speak to me much anymore. Not out of anger, out of a kind of quiet disappointment that's worse than anger." He paused. "I took this job because I wanted a life where the only thing I was responsible for was making sure people got in out of the rain. I was good at that. I needed to be good at something small for a while." Elliot sat with that, and something in his chest that had been clenched since 6:40 that morning loosened by a fraction, not because the market had recovered, but because for the first time all morning, someone in front of him was not afraid of the number. And that fear, he realized, had been contagious in a way he hadn't noticed until it left the air. "So what do I do?" Elliot said, not as a challenge, as a genuine question, maybe the first genuine question he'd asked another human being in years. "You stop watching the number and you find out what's actually still moving," Dale said. "Call your risk desk. Not your traders, your risk desk, the ones you probably haven't spoken to directly in 2 years because you trust your own models more than the people paid to doubt them. Find out what's hedged and what isn't. Then you make exactly one decision, the smallest one that protects the most people who aren't you. Then you make the next one. Panic feels like motion. It isn't, it's just fear wearing a suit." Elliot called his risk desk on the bench outside his own building, with a retired doorman sitting beside him, and for 11 minutes he listened more carefully than he had listened to anyone in a decade. What he found wasn't good. The losses were real, but they were containable, survivable, smaller than the number that had buckled his knees, because the number on his phone had been the worst-case headline, not the position. By 7:20, Marsh Capital had a plan. It would be a brutal quarter. It would not be the end of the firm or of him. He looked at Dale for a long moment afterward. 11 years, he said. "I walked past you 11 years. Most people do," Dale said, without bitterness, and that more than anything was what stayed with Elliot for the rest of the day. Not the market, not the losses, but the plainness with which a man could say that sentence about his own invisibility. That evening, Elliot didn't send flowers or a bonus check because he understood, somehow, that those would have been the wrong currency entirely. Instead, he asked Dale a question nobody had asked him in 11 years. Whether he'd ever consider sitting down with a young analyst on the 41st floor, off the books, unpaid if he wanted it that way, just to talk about risk the way he'd talked about it on the bench. Not a job, not charity, a room where what he knew still mattered to someone. Dale thought about it for 3 days. Then he said yes, on one condition, that his son be the one to make the introduction if he was willing. Elliot found him. It took 2 phone calls and an apology that wasn't his to give, but he gave it anyway on Dale's behalf, because sometimes the powerful can open doors the proud cannot open for themselves. Dale's son came to the building on a Sunday, stood in the lobby his father had guarded for 11 years, and for the first time in 6 years, called him Dad instead of nothing at all. If this story moved you, please like this video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to Kindness Tales for more stories of courage, grace, and the small human moments that change everything. And tell us in the comments, who in your life have you walked past without ever really seeing?